Hello, everybody, and welcome to this evening's event from Jesus College Intellectual Forum. My name's Julian Huppert. I'm the director of the Intellectual Forum here at Jesus College. You can get a sense of what it's like behind me and in sunnier times, back when it was possible to go out and explore. We are recording this event because we know that a lot of people will be watching it later on. Now, Jesus College is an ancient institution. We were originally a 12th century nunnery. In 1496, we became a college. But more recently, the Intellectual Forum was set up just a few years ago to get people thinking and talking about important issues and to reach outside the boundaries of our own college. We've had amazing speakers covering all sorts of different issues. We've had fashion designer Jimmy Chu. We've had the former New Zealand Prime Minister, Helen Clark, Director of NASA's Deep Space X-ray Observatory, Belinda Wilkes, Hygiene, executive producer of The Simpsons, a whole range of amazing people. And you can see many of those recordings on our YouTube site. We've also shown off the work that's being done inside our own college by many of our own academics, whether that's using synthetic biology to come up with an amazing new, safe, clean way to dye clothes, or amazing experiments with the coldest things in the universe, colder even than outer space. We even had the distinguished president of the college talking about his research on swear words. But this week, we're looking at a crucially important issue that affects every single one of us: sleep. Most people don't sleep enough, and it has huge consequences for all of us. We're not so good at concentrating, we have worse moods, we're more likely to be unwell, whether heart attacks or cancer. People who haven't slept very much the night before are much more likely to be involved in a fatal car crash. Now, most of us wouldn't go into a car with a drunk driver, but have you ever asked if they've slept enough the night before? And as we're about to hear, there is a huge economic cost. Rand estimate about £40 billion cost to the UK economy from lack of sleep. So we've had a number of events through this week. We started off hearing from anthropologist Professor Helen Ball, talking about the work she'd been done on baby and infant sleep. We then looked at technology, with Jessica Toe and Erin Flynn Evans from the baby tracking and sleep improvement app Huckleberry for a fascinating talk looking at the realities of infant sleep. Then we heard from Michael Grandner, clinical psychologist, internationally recognised expert in sleep health, who talked about all the consequences that lack of sleep has on our personal health and well-being. That's both physical and mental health. An amazing talk from him. And on Thursday, we looked again at technology and Sleep Cycle, who've become the world's richest repository of data on global sleep habits. All of those are on our YouTube channel, and you can watch them at your leisure. Today is the final event, and we're going to hear from Michael Whitmore, who's a research leader at RAND Europe. And he has an amazing track record. He's been developing initiatives and research into health, work, and well-being for many years, more than 30 years, across health and social care and work. And he's done some amazing things in that time. I could talk for a huge amount of time. But to give you one idea, he and I were just talking about how he actually led the logistics setup of the NHS COVID-19 national vaccination programme, something for which we're all incredibly grateful for him for. He insists he hasn't done the whole thing himself, and that most of the actual vaccinations were done by somebody else, but he set it up. So to let you know how this will work, we're going to hear from Michael, and he'll talk for maybe about half an hour. And then we have an opportunity for questions. So you should see a Q&A feature, and you can put questions in there, and I will then put those to Michael. I cannot guarantee, of course, it will get through every single question anybody might want to put, but we'll try to get a good collection of all of those. As a reminder, this is being recorded, but I hope you'll enjoy this now. And so, Michael, it is a great pleasure to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Julian. So good evening, everybody. Just bear with me a second while I share my slide deck with you. There we go. So thank you very much, Julian, for that introduction, and hello everybody, and I hope we are all okay after what I'm sure has been quite a long week, and those of us in the UK that have been dealing with the back to school issues as well. So thanks for joining, everyone. As Julian said, I'm a research leader here at RAND Europe. RAND Europe is a not-for-profit research institute. We do a lot of policy research, as well as supporting much decision-making across organizations and government departments. You may have seen us in various other research areas, and also we also operate from RAND Corporation in the US and RAND Europe ourselves. We've been over for about 25 years, both in Cambridge, our offices in Cambridge, as well as our offices in Brussels. And so, as Julian said, over the last 10 to 12 years, I've predominantly looked at health and work, and also had 30 years in general in my career across the health and social care arenas. And for the last 4 or 5 years, have been very happily here with RAND Europe. And also I speak from a clinical background as far as being a cognitive behavior therapist as well. And so I do speak from some of that background. And so I hope to share a little of the information that we have around sleep and why it does matter. And Julian has already mentioned some of the poignant aspects of that. And so, having already mentioned about RAND Europe also has a partnership with Vitality Health, and we've had that for a number of years, spanning at least 8 or 9 years now. And we take data in the form of employee health surveys, which are free for all organizations who take part. Their employees answer a set of questions that can range up to about 100 questions around the biopsychosocial aspects of their health, of their work environment, and also importantly, their engagement aspects as well. We ask them questions that help us gauge their productivity on a subjective basis, which then allows us to make calculations as to how their various health issues may be impacting on their work and productivity. We provide the individuals with their health reports more or less instantly, which provides them with a health age, and then they're able to understand whether they need to take action, and if so, whereabouts in their behaviours that may be, because we'll present that to them as well as the organisation receiving about a 55 to 60 page report explaining to them where their particular health and well-being hotspots may be. Maybe that's with employees having an issue around financial well-being, maybe it's increased musculoskeletal issues, mental health issues, and so on. And so obviously we see these aspects trending greatly over the last years that we've been doing the program. So with Britain's Healthiest Workplace, that's also expanded out now across to Asia, and RAND Europe also works in Canada as well, analysing and reporting similar data. So some of the background to this report also borrows from our analysis of that data as well. And so looking at how sleep affects us all, we can group it into a number of aspects. And so if we think about how sleep affects us cognitively, then as Julian mentioned at the introduction there, it can make us forgetful if we don't have enough sleep. It does affect our concentration. We might not always notice it, but it does affect our concentration. And also importantly, when we're sleeping, it does help the brain to clear out certain toxins. Some of those toxins have been associated with the dementias as well. And so there's a lot of good reasons from a cognitive basis why having a good night's sleep supports our functioning the next day. It also has an impact on us physically, and again, Julian mentioned, it makes us vulnerable to infections, the common cold, for instance. And it does have an impact on our chronic health conditions, and it can also have an impact on obesity and heart conditions. And that's not only via lack of sleep, but it's also via the fact that when we do have lack of sleep and therefore we're more tired, we're more inclined to make the unhealthier choices. We make our go-to choices. So those healthier habits we might be trying to put into place, or those lower sugary foods, less alcohol, all the things that we will find, and we'll all have different approaches and personalities around what we prefer, but all those things that we might normally try to avoid when we're making the healthier choices. When we're more tired, we're more prone to go into those behaviors. We've also got issues around mental health, and sleep is really a symptom of virtually every known mental health condition. So, for instance, depression, PTSD, anxiety, and so on. So there's lots of reasons why sleep is affecting us across many aspects. And you'll see there as well around the performance. So might have seen our little colleague on the screen there with the driving steering wheel. So we actually know that, if you're having less than 5 hours sleep for 4 or 5 consecutive nights, research has shown that you're likely to be expected to be driving around as though you're legally drunk. And so really, if anybody needs a sort of reason as to, and the evidence as to why sleep and the lack of sleep is so important. And I think that's really something that helps us to really understand and mentally signify that. And so when we come to think about sleep, and we can think about sleep in various ways, and my presentation tonight does actually look at sleep on a few different angles. We'll be looking at it from the economic impact. We'll also be looking at it from an individual impact, and also some of those behaviours that we might be able to put in place to get a better night's sleep. But if you look at this slide, then 1 in 3 Americans sleep less than the recommended 7 hours a night. So most reports and most research out on sleep will in some way discuss the optimum levels of sleep between 7 and 9 hours, and certainly anything less than 6 is very difficult. You might have, say, the 1% of individuals that can operate well on low numbers of hours of sleep, but they're few and far between. Excuse me. And so there are some outliers, but the majority of us will be needing that 7 to 9 hours sleep to actually perform at our best. And so with that in mind, the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have declared insufficient sleep a public health epidemic. There's a lot of interest, there's a lot of research moving into sleep. And yet at the moment, we still know relatively little about its impact. But as Julian mentioned on some of the great speakers that we've had this week, and also the various other research areas that are coming up, there's more and more interest as we start to understand just what that's about. So I'm sure some of us are tired at the end of this week, and also looking forward to maybe getting some sleep at the weekend. Some of us may be expecting to get less sleep at the weekend. But people sleeping less than 7 hours a night do vary across different countries. But if you are tired now and at the end of this week, and maybe not had such a good week's sleep, then you're not alone in that. In the UK, 35% of the population are sleeping less than 7 hours a night. Look at Germany, that moves to 30% of their population. If you move across to Canada, it's 26%. And Japan is the hardest hit. So there's 56% of Japan's population that are sleeping less than 7 hours a night. So you can see that there are cultural differences affecting how much we sleep, depending on the lifestyles and the population at large. And so with all this in mind, Rand Europe decided to do a study a few years back on why sleep matters. It's quite a seminal piece of research and really opened the floodgates into a lot of discussion around sleep. And we're very pleased as a research organisation to have had such strong impact with this particular piece of work. And so what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about how the report actually came about in the first place. It came about through Marco Hafner, who's the lead author of the report, who's also an economist. And he, as you can see there, was happily married with his wife, and they were raising a family. And the more that they raised a family, or the more children they had, the less sleep Marco was getting. And the less sleep that Marco was getting meant that the more tired he was at work. He was not able to function very well. Sometimes he couldn't remember driving into work, and he was becoming more and more distant in the office itself when he was in the office and not working from home. And so he decided to do something about this. He wanted to know, how much the rest of the world was suffering with this and what it actually meant from an economic basis. So he wanted to put some dollar signs against how much this lack of sleep was costing, having noted that his presenteeism and productivity at work was taking a hit while he was raising his children. Now, while Marco was having that idea, then I was having a parallel relationship with sleep, and I'd been speaking to Marco about it. So from my personal perspective, at the time previous to Marco writing the report, I was living right in the centre of London in the UK. I lived in Soho. If anybody knows it, I was living just behind Carnaby Street. Now that's quite an urban area, lots of noise, but also at the same time as that, my partner had developed a very strong snoring habit, and I had a very loud crow. So all these things in separations almost sound quite jovial, but when you place it all together, you start to have a lot of disrupted sleep. And then I moved to south central London in Brixton, and we've got 3 cats. And anybody that's got cats knows that they like to get up first thing in the morning, whatever time the dawn is. And so basically, there's lots of different aspects of sleep that can be affected, and my sleep was being affected. At the same time as that, previous to Rand, I also worked in the global role, and I'm sure many of us on the call may be doing that as well. I'm certainly no stranger to jet lag, and many calls right through into the evening and early mornings through the different time zones that we all now work within. And so the point being to these stories and helping to sort of embellish with a little bit of personal insights is that we will all have our relationship with sleep. And as I'm talking and as I move through the presentation, I'm hoping that you'll all start to consider your relationship with sleep just that little bit more, and understand what impact it could be doing on you and those around you. And the interesting thing with sleep is, because it hasn't necessarily got that social stigma connected to it that sometimes mental health still does, that we can all have our own personal story with sleep, and we'll all have a different reason and a different way of speaking with sleep. So it's very encouraging, and I've done it with my staff as well, as Lead for Wellbeing, bringing together different groups to talk about wellbeing in the staff cohorts, and many of them will want to talk about sleep and what's impacting that. And as many different people there are in the room, will be as many different stories there are as sleep. And we mentioned at the start about the children going back to school, and many people I know will be having different relationships with sleep because of that as well. And so what does that actually all mean? How did Marco look at this? How are all these effects coming together? How big a problem is it really? And does insufficient sleep affect our work when it boils down to it? Well, yes, it does. If you look at these figures, you can see in the United States that it's affecting a loss of 2.3% of the GDP, which is $411 billion. In Japan, it's $138 billion loss. That's 2.9% of the GDP. And if you look then at Canada and across the United Kingdom, you can see respectively there's a loss there running at about 21 billion to Canada and 50 billion to the UK, and then through to Germany with a $60 billion loss at 1.6% of the GDP. So how much could we be saving with the economy? And so if people who sleep less than just 6 hours began to sleep just that extra hour to get them to the more healthy number of hours, from 6 to 7 hours, it would, or it could, add billions to national economies. In the United States, just that hour's difference, bringing everybody up to the level of sleeping at least 7 hours a night, would mean that we've got $226 billion worth of increased economic activity. We'd have Germany providing an extra $34 billion, and the United Kingdom an extra $30 billion. So these figures all make sense, and they certainly make sense to the economists around us, and I would urge you to look at the report, and more than happy to share that, but a quick Google search will also help you find that as well, on the macroeconomic modeling that we did take for this. It's very similar to that the Treasury and other agencies would work through. It was calculated by running scenarios of how the economy would evolve. So if people change their sleep behavior and duration to the healthy sleep range. So looking at different agents and looking at how that behavior of those agents would change as a result of sleeping in different ways and for different lengths of time. So where were those behaviors? Where were those agents? So what areas did we focus on in the economy? So going to school, working, consuming, shopping behaviors, how much we might save, how much we invest, and retirement. What do we do in retirement? So all of those things moved into the macroeconomic model, and we were able then to look at what that actually meant and bring about some of these figures we've been talking about. And there are three particular effects that were coming out of that analysis I'd like to draw out tonight. First is there's a very strong reason to be sleeping that little bit longer to get us all into the healthy range of 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. From the figures you can see here in front of you, people who regularly sleep less than 6 hours a day have a 13% greater chance of dying at any point than people who get that magic 7 to 9 hours sleep. And whether that's 7 hours sleep or 8 hours sleep or 9 hours sleep will depend on the person itself, but the range is there, 7 to 9 hours. The second effect we looked at was around productivity. Now, when we look at productivity, and Rand's done a lot of work looking at health and work and the impact on productivity, then we look at two things together to form that. We look at the absenteeism, so how many days sick have people formally measured, and how many days in other ways have they had off work, and we class that as absenteeism. We also, though, and importantly, have presenteeism. And presenteeism is, as you can see by our colleagues lumped over the desk there, where somebody's not necessarily doing the work that they could be doing if they were being more focused and in the zone of work. So it's where they could be at work, but not actually doing the work that they're intended to do. And that can be for many different reasons. And it's not to say that the utopia is to have every employee working at 100% productivity. That would just create burnout and have the opposite effect. But nevertheless, there is an area where we can improve productivity through improving presenteeism, and the two areas combined help to generate that sense of productivity. Presenteeism as well is very important in high hazard jobs and roles and industries, where being asleep on the job or just not being at your optimum, not being 100% is literally the difference between life and death of either yourself or those colleagues around you. If you're a banksman in the construction industry looking out for your colleagues, or if you're the driver of a train, then it's important that you are alert and that you are present when you're at work. So those sleeping less than 6 hours a night are 2.4% less productive than those in the healthy sleep range. So each year, a large number of working days are lost just due to insufficient sleep, if you add all of that up across the employee population, even if just the UK. Then we looked at school performance. And again, Rand has done further research into this as well. But suboptimal school performance in younger years does hinder the development of children. It is a biological fact that children need to sleep longer in the mornings. And you can see, for instance, in the USA, where school start times often are at 7:35 in the morning. Just by extending that by an extra hour to 8:30 in the morning, then the US could contribute at least another $83 billion to the economy. And some states have actually taken up changes in their school start times based on the research that Rand and others have done. And so I do suggest that you have a look on the website and have a read of that if that's of interest to you. It affects the qualifications that they achieve, and it also therefore impacts on the jobs that they get in the future. So when I mentioned that $83 billion to the economy, that's running after 10 years. So that's after a 10-year simulation. So there's lots of very good reasons that we should be pursuing better sleep. And that's sometimes easier said than done. But what does that actually mean when you look at how we can change and how that impacts on our lives specifically? Well, we've quantified it through how much sleep people lose if they have an association with some of these other factors. So I mentioned earlier about our work with Britain's Healthiest Workplace and the survey research that we conduct there. And so we're able to bring about associations with these. So we don't state, or we can't say the causality. So we don't know, for instance, which affects what, but we do know that, for instance, if somebody is obese, then they are on average sleeping 7 minutes less. If somebody has mental health needs, then they'll be sleeping 17.2 minutes less than somebody who doesn't. Financial concerns, so if somebody's worrying about money, then they're likely on average to be losing 10 minutes sleep a night. And you can see there on the screen that the commute of 60 minutes or more can generate 16.5 minutes on average of loss of sleep. Again, many of us, I'm sure, will be able to feel that effect. This last year, and it is a year now since we've been locked down, many of us are not probably traveling as much, and it has probably had well, it's had various different impacts on our lives and on sleep itself. Some of us are sleeping more, some of us are having more vivid dreams, and some of us are sleeping less. So a bit of a variety, really. But however, you know, when we are commuting on regularly 60 minutes or more to work, then it does have that quite strong impact. And I know that from my own experience. For instance, you know, if I commute to our offices in Cambridge at Rand, which I commonly do, obviously, when we're not in lockdown, you know, that's a 2.5 hour commute each way. I won't be getting home until at least 9 o'clock and then having my evening meal. So by the time my body's tried to adjust to that, and then I'm trying to get to sleep, ready to get up at 5:30 to get back into work the next day. Not that I do that on an everyday basis, 5 days a week, I hasten to add, but nevertheless, we all have experiences where we can see that this chart can have an impact. And so this is cumulative as well. So you can add in these different factors. So just to show that in a different way, lifestyle pressures. If you look on the right-hand side, so say if you're average person here, 33 to 55 years of age, maybe drinking a couple of sugary drinks a day, maybe does have that 1 hour commute each way to work, maybe has 1 or 2 dependent children under the age of 18 still living in the household, financial concerns, having some unrealistic time pressures at work, and also not doing enough exercise or not as much exercise as maybe they'd like to. So, fairly common sort of picture. But if you're a male, you could be expecting to lose 56 minutes on average to your night's sleep. And if you're female, that's probably 47 minutes on average less sleep a night because of that. On the left-hand side of the screen, if you just look at work itself and you look at some of the psychosocial aspects of work, so working irregular hours, not having that 1 hour commute, but still nevertheless having the 30 to 60 minutes each way. And then those experiences at work, lack of choice, unrealistic time pressures, lack of support from colleagues and lack of consultation. Some of those you'll see from the HSE workplace standards. And a lot of the questions we ask are from publicly available validated scales. Excuse me. Then if you've got those work-only pressures, then you're still likely to be losing 28.5 minutes on average of sleep a night due to those psychosocial work environment issues that are happening in the workplace. So, with the insomnia and the lack of sleep, if it's costing so much, what can we do? So I've been talking about lack of sleep, and there's different aspects to sleep. There's both the quality of sleep. I've been talking largely as well tonight about the quantity of sleep. So it's not only how long do you sleep, but it's also your perception of your sleep that can also have an impact on your health. And also there's incidental issues with sleep. So from time to time, we all have a bad night's sleep or a poor night's sleep. And that can be slightly disruptive, but we get up in the morning, we get on and we move on and we can kind of forget about that. Now, if you start talking more about insomnia, there's 3 different types of insomnia. The first is under a week, it's short term, maybe around 30% of the population generally might be affected by some type of insomnia. That includes short term, transient or chronic. But nevertheless, with the short term, there's probably something happening, maybe at work, maybe at home, that's just having a short term effect on you and you pick up and you get on. If it's starting to last longer than a week, but less than 3 weeks, then it becomes more transient. You start to notice it more. You start to become a little bit more concerned that it's not getting better. And then from 3 weeks onwards, it starts to be classed more as a chronic issue. And around 10% of the general population may have chronic insomnia at any particular time. So how does that work for an individual when you're trying to get to sleep? Well, it works in 3 different ways, really. So you can class there's 3 different sort of types of insomnia. So I can't sleep. So a classic one is counting sheep, onset on insomnia, maybe down to anxiety, maybe your head's whirring around, you can't sort of put things to bed, as it were, in your head, too much going on. And maybe you've had a stressful event of the day, and because you've been so busy, you haven't actually been able to think about it, and your brains and your mind's not had no chance to be able to start to process it. And so becoming quiet at the end of the day can create onset anxiety and insomnia. If you wake early in the morning, and sometimes this is associated with depression, it can be other things as well, of course. But if you're waking early in the morning, then that's another type of insomnia. And that's so if you're setting the alarm clock and you're waking up much before that, and just much before your intended time, or your normal time, then that's another issue as well. And also with the nocturnal aspects, this is often largely due to pain or illness or medication that you're on. So that means that you can actually get to sleep, but then you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep. So again, Rand's done some research on Nocturia, for instance, which is a clinical condition of getting up in the night more than twice, 2 or more times, to go to the toilet, to urinate. Often misdiagnosed, but can have quite an impact on people's lives. It lowers the life satisfaction equal to hypertension, cardiovascular, and asthma. And about 20% of the population is estimated to be experiencing this at any one time. And although as you get older, you could have a greater opportunity to experience it, nevertheless, younger age groups also experience it. So having it diagnosed correctly means you can make changes to your lifestyle that support that. So how is that happening? How can we actually change how we do things individually? Well, often we're walking around and we're fine, and we'll have some beliefs such as the ones that are on the screen here now at the moment. You know, I prefer that my head works well for work, but it's not the end of the world. We may be consciously thinking this, or they may just be helping us get through life. I prefer to fall asleep now, but it's not absolutely terrible. I accept I may not sleep on demand every time. That's okay. You know, I can cope with it. I'm not going to maybe feel 100% tomorrow, but I'll manage it one way or another. And that's okay. And you might have your incidental lack of sleep, or maybe even short-term insomnia, and you're getting by. However, then what may happen is those thoughts start to get entrenched. And when those thoughts start to get entrenched, it's very much harder to let go of them. And when it's very much harder to let go of them, you start to demand them like the air that you breathe. So I must not feel tired, because if I do, I just can't cope. I've got a very demanding job in the morning. My job in general is very demanding. I need my intellectual capacity. I must go to sleep, and I must go to sleep now. If I wake up during the night, I must go back to sleep quickly, and I can't stand it. It's going to be the end of the world. And those types of thoughts, and paraphrasing those types of thoughts now, actually mean that it becomes paradoxically much more difficult. The more you demand to go to sleep, the more you focus on trying to go to sleep, the more difficult it can be. And I'm sure as I'm speaking, some people are reflecting on some times when that actually is the case for themselves. So I want to take a moment to ask you to pause and to close your eyes. So just close your eyes, and I want you not to think about a pink elephant. Whatever you do, do not think about a pink elephant. Now, if you open your eyes again, I'm pretty sure that most of you would have not been able to do anything but think about a pink elephant, or at least have a glimmer of a pink elephant. Maybe not quite the same as our friend here on the screen, maybe the same as our friend here on the screen, but nevertheless, you haven't been able not to think about a pink elephant once I asked you not to do that. And it's the same. The more you demand not to be awake, the more you're going to be awake. Let's see our friend here float away. And so we're looking to remove that spiral of internal stress and noisiness to one that's leading us through to the light and the relief of sleep itself. And how do we get a better night's sleep? Relaxation is one of those things, and we'll all have different ways of relaxing, and maybe some of us are out of tune with what we can remember as how to relax, or maybe just don't have the time. But setting up some sort of routine for relaxation, even if it's only 5 minutes, can be invaluable as far as helping ourselves get to sleep. Many people have different ways around that. So some people it's mindfulness, meditation, relaxation, reading a book, walking. We'll all have our own ways that we know we can relax with. And it's important to get some relaxation at some time. I've already mentioned about travel. So managing travel, understanding that jet lag will have an impact and not ignoring it, and trying to manage our travel accordingly to allow our body clocks and our body functions to get into a state of normalcy, is very important. If we are worrying about things, then talk about them. Often easier said than done, but that can be with anybody around you. It can also obviously be done with other professionals and to reach out to others. And so if you are worried about something and perpetually worried about them, then please do communicate. Reducing stimulus is another aspect. So that can be caffeine, it can be sugars. So anything that impacts on perking your body up, try and manage when you're taking that. And also, I'll talk about it in the next slide as well a little bit, but obviously reducing the time on devices. There's an awful lot in the media at the moment around making sure you limit the time on that. And also setting a regular wake-up call is also going to help you and your body get into a pattern. And that's not just Monday to Friday. So tomorrow, Saturday, get up at the same time. Make sure you're getting a regular pattern of waking up, which will help you to set a regular pattern of sleeping. And that can be invaluable in helping with a stronger sleep routine. So with the sleep hygiene as well, set yourself an agenda that includes exercise if you can, with relaxation. Know when you're going to be waking up, know when you're going to be going to bed, know when you're going to have your meals so you can start to plan for them. Everybody will have different opportunities to do this, but it's important to try and get some sort of sense of an agenda and some sort of regularity into your day. Exercise, as I've said, is important and will help you sleep better, but try not to do it at times just before you're going to sleep, because that will arouse and awaken the body and again the mind as well, and so will make it more difficult to go to sleep if you're exercising immediately or shortly before going to sleep. Sugary foods, reduce and manage the amount of sugar. And I would say with all of these things, obviously you do that in respective to medical advice. So make sure you're only making changes where you know that it's safe. But if you reduce your sugar intake, if you know you take a lot of sugar in foods and so on, that can be a very good and strong way of helping you sleep better, as well as managing that into the mornings. So any caffeine, any stimulants, try and take that more in the mornings and then move off that in the afternoons and the evenings. And that is the same for alcohol. Don't take any, don't drink if you do drink. I'm not assuming that we all drink. However, if you do drink, make sure that, that you're not taking the alcohol in the evening, because that will affect you going to sleep. It will also affect you waking up in the middle of the night or early and not being able to get back to sleep as well. And as I've suggested, manage your devices. We all have our relationships with our electronic devices, but the more you can switch them off the earlier in the evening, the better. And the more you look at the screen before you go to bed, the more, again, it will wake you up and you'll be fighting a losing battle on going to sleep. So in summary, because I am noticing the time here, then we have chances to manage our use of electronic devices before and during bedtime. As I've gone over, there are other aspects as well. But if you're going to choose to do one thing, that I suggest might be an easy win. Promoting healthy sleep behavior at work supports the amenities and sleep. And from a policy perspective, from a public health and population health perspective, information campaigns, both in the workplace and in the population in general, will help us support. I did also mention that, that our report has hit the headlines. It's hit the headlines across the world, really, and it still continues to have a ripple effect with the impact that we reach. And we're very pleased to see that many other people now are researching sleep and also adding to the knowledge base and the information that we have there. And many organisations are helping to support their staff. Here's a sleep pod, quite innovative, but we can all find ways of supporting messaging and facilities in the workplace to support people that do need to get some sleep. So improving sleep is a win-win. There's Marco there with his wife, and there's me with my fiance. and we're having a much better night's sleep. And I hope in some way that this presentation tonight will help give you pause for thought, give you the economic impetus to realize there is a business case for improving your sleep, but also very much so a personal case for making sure you get that magic 7 to 9 hours sleep. So thank you very much for your time tonight as we're moving towards bedtimes. I hope there's still a little time for questions, and also to mention here, if you do want to find any of our research, RAND Europe has all of our research on open access, and you can find it on our website. So if you just search on Google for RAND Sleep, pertinent to these research pieces, RAND Sleep, RAND Nocturia, I should say, sorry, and RAND Sleep School Times, and you will find our report and research. But if you look on RAND Europe's website, you will find a lot of interesting research, as I mentioned before, all the way across from health through to innovation, defence, through to criminal justice and social care. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. That was really fascinating. A whole range of really interesting things. And we do have a number of questions, so I hope we'll be able to get through quite a few of them. Can I just start off with a question about the productivity piece? So you said that people are, I think, 2.4% less productive if they're getting less than 6 hours of sleep. Some people would say, well, okay, that's fine, but if I can work an extra few hours, maybe I can work an extra 20% longer. So does that mean it's actually worthwhile working really hard and getting tired, but putting those extra hours in? Or does it actually work the other way around?
So Julian, it's an interesting question. And so basically it's around the presenteeism and the productivity. So it's not just about the quantity of the hours that we put in, it's the quality of the work that we do as well. And so the cognitive functioning so there's two aspects, and obviously it depends on the role that we have in the workplace. But the cognitive functioning of whatever we do in the workplace is very important. So working those extra hours when we're already tired will just provide diminishing returns on that activity. And so really it's not going to work out. And as I mentioned before, if you are in a high hazard industry, and as we mentioned earlier, in the health settings, and for instance as well, you don't want surgeons being tired. We can all imagine what the consequences are of that. And so patient outcomes will be as a consequence of those working longer. And many people in the NHS do work very long at the moment, and will be feeling the impact of that. And again, in other high hazard industries, there's high risk of feeling tired. And so we're actually doing work with the NHS at the moment, looking at how to keep their staff more well as we go forward.
So I think it's very useful to know that the correct answer isn't the burning the candle at every end, working as many hours as possible. I think that's good to be clear on. Now, I've been interested in sleep for a while, and whenever I talk to people about it, there are people who will say, but some people don't need sleep, or they'll say there may be one of them. Margaret Thatcher needed 4 hours of sleep, or whatever it is. You mentioned right at the beginning of the talk that there are outliers.
Yeah.
How many are real outliers, or are people occasionally deluding themselves?
Well, there's about arguably there's about 1% of the population that can manage on less than 6 or 7 hours sleep, and so you will come across, but they're very few and far between. And I think the word you chose there, deluding, is probably quite a good word to use. So those that are saying that they don't need sleep and sleep is for wimps, and they're probably the ones that are making the suboptimal decisions. Unfortunately, often they can be leaders. And if you look at the unhealthy behaviors that they both personify themselves, but also lead in their cultures, it can be quite devastating. I mean, sleep has been attributed to the disasters in Chernobyl, the Challenger space shuttle, the Exxon spill, and the list goes on. And so it's a very real risk. And so those leaders that are kidding themselves, like I say, there's about 1% the population that can manage on less than that amount of sleep. And maybe Margaret Thatcher was one of those 1%, and so it's not to argue that they may not operate on it, but they're few and far between, and there will be many people that are just projecting this fallacy that we should all be getting less sleep.
So building on that, we've had a number of questions about workplace sleep. And so, for example, we've had questions about what should good team leaders do, not the problematic ones you were talking about. What should somebody do as a boss, as a manager, to get to work with their teams to get a pro-sleep culture? What should they try?
Well, there's various different approaches to it, and it's almost as varied as the different cultures in the organisations, and it depends where we're talking. So for instance, I've worked with the construction industries. I've set up and launched a mental health program and campaign, charitable one across the UK construction industry, and there we would talk about sleep, and it would range for managers that would, and this is in construction firms, managers that would allow and see the benefits of staff being able to sleep within the premises when they were tired, to those that would not allow that to happen and would not provide facilities for sleeping. And yet, looking at what I've just presented to you today, hopefully I made a fairly strong case that actually allowing an individual to sleep when they're tired, you're going to get a much better result from that. And so that's one way, when you're putting in amenities that are suited to your place of work. So that's one aspect. The cultural aspect is around having line managers and training that supports the cultural understanding that getting a good night's sleep is important, and coming to work feeling well and rested is important, and that psychological safety is therefore something that is supported within organisations. One of the things in workplace health that you don't want to be doing is saying one thing with your left and doing something else with your right. So explaining to all the staff that mental health and talking about sleep is absolutely fine, and yet the behaviours of the organisation show that if somebody does that, then they are at best ignored, at worst disciplined. And so we don't want to go back to those archaic sort of principles. And so just being able to bring out campaigns around sleep, supporting that, and educating people around some of the stuff that I've talked about in this presentation, and it's in the report. If you need to get some facts and figures, just reminding people, starting to bring that out. So it's both at a sort of mass marketing campaign within organisations, at the cultural level of training the staff, but also importantly training the managers to be able to manage staff issues, and also to be able to spot and see the signs when staff are struggling. So that's quite important, but also from the structural point of view of placing the symbols in the workplace, but also the amenities and supporting access to sleep, either in the workplace or access to sleep facilities and services outside of the workplace.
And I mean, you mentioned about how people make less good decisions when they're tired. Are there any nice ways to measure whether somebody is too tired to work? Could you test somebody when they arrive in the morning and show them that they're not really in a fit state to do something? Or that they are?
Well, I don't think I think I'd steer clear of advocating testing people too much for tiredness, although it is, like I say, in the high hazard industries, people will be more vigilant around that. And there has been experimentation with RIFIDs and so on, so that people can sort of manage the amount of time people are at work, and also if they will take part in it, then to understand what their other aspects of the workplace are. And there's obviously personal information around apps and websites and so on. So if individuals are happy to take part in certain initiatives, then there are ways for them to able to self-diagnose how tired they are and then decide to share that with the employer or not. So there are sort of different approaches around that.
And you touched on briefly, and I mentioned the introduction about people who drive while being tired, and that's significantly more risky. Do you think the police are well aware of that? Is there enough public information about that? The sort of anti-drink and drive way that we've seen work quite well. And also, just to throw in, should employers be liable if they are working their employees so hard that they are dangerous on the roads?
So from a personal understanding, I'm not too aware of how aware the police are around this issue. I think from the approach of the campaign, I'm sure they must be. If you think about driving in the motorways, for many years now, we have signs there saying, don't drive when you're tired, and even to some extent, take a coffee. So it's very well understood the amount of accidents that are created and caused by tiredness, and so that's certainly an aspect. And I think you raise a good point around whether employers should be liable for and have a duty of care to their employees around tiredness. And I don't know, I haven't tracked the legal cases around the tiredness in the workplace. But to my mind, employers do have a duty of care to manage their staff, and many will now, for good reasons and for all the right reasons, be looking at productivity and mental health. For instance, RAND ourselves are currently funded to look at that ourselves, and we know some of the psycho factors within the work environment that are actually impacting on people in that place. And so some tribunals, even indirectly, will be having that approach where there's isolation, where there's lack of support from peers, where there's bullying in the workplace. All of those things, employers do have a responsibility to protect their staff from.
So we're getting a sort of big flood of questions coming. So can I step up from sort of what an employer might do to look a bit more about national policies? And so there's a question from Gregory Thomas. Not everybody puts their name in to who the questions are, but I will mention you if you do put your name on, who says, what countries in the world do a good job of promoting healthy sleep practices? Is there anywhere that does a really good job of this?
I don't know of anywhere that really stands out from anywhere else. I think it's more the types of the cultural relationship that countries have with sleep differ. And so, for instance, as you saw in the figures in Japan, and as we see in some of our research across Asia, there are much longer working hours in many of the countries that take part in our survey across in Asia, and a lot less sleep happening as a result of that. So there would be cultural issues and there's cultural expectations. So I would say, from that point of view, there's certainly cultures in certain countries that drive people to work long hours and to sleep less and less as a result of that. So if you look at it from a deficit model, then I can certainly point to some countries that do have difficulties with that. But then I think then you start to move to some of the other countries I showed you in this presentation. They all have good and bad points about how they promote health.
Interesting. And so people have also asked about the environment that people are in. I want to start off with a question from Jamie Hooper. What can you suggest for people when there's noise that you can't control? So you've got the workplace environment that you may have limited control. What about home? What can you do to help deal with extraneous noises there?
So there's a few different approaches, and it also depends on people individually as well, what works for you. And so some of it's around, what can you physically do to reduce the impact of that noise? For instance, wearing earplugs, and many earplugs now you can wear to cut out certain bandwidths. So those that might be worried about missing emergency sounds or alarms and so on, you still very much hear those. So that helps to some degree. Changing where you sleep may not obviously be an option for many people, but that can have a change. So some people may be sleeping in one room at the front of wherever they live, moving to the back might suddenly have a different feel, might have a different resonance. So there's things you can do to sort of change your receiving of the noise. There's things you can obviously do in your surroundings to try and reduce the noise, but I'm assuming by the nature of the question that's not necessarily a possibility. And then I think the third thing is going back to the slides that I said around what's your relationship with that noise? So you can choose, even though it might sound difficult, I can assure you, you can choose. You do have an emotional responsibility to choose how you actually behave around that noise. And so, for instance, I'll talk from personal experience. My partner snoring for many years, I was demanding that my partner didn't snore, and it was all their fault. And the more I demanded that they shouldn't snore, the less I slept. Whereas now I've taken a completely different approach to how I feel about that, going back to some of those thought bubbles. And it doesn't worry me. I just see it as a much more, satisfactory noise, let's put it like that. It's the best I can phrase it. So, but cognitively, you can change your relationship, which means that you won't wake up so much around it.
So you should learn to love the snore and not complain about it. I think that's a great tip for some people here, at least.
Yeah, don't demand that the person stop snoring. It's not going to happen.
And actually, a related question to this is about the sort of the environments we all live in. Do you ever advise councils on how they should create an urban environment that is good for healthy sleep? One can imagine about nighttime heavy goods vehicles, bin collections, and various other things. Do councils ever get in touch to ask what they could do for their population?
So at RAND, we do a lot of work with different councils, and also with Cambridge Ahead as a sort of membership group of different organisations. And so we've done quite a lot of looking at transportation and well-being and so on. And following on from that, for instance, we obviously from the slides we showed you, we know how that then impacts sleep. So travel and commuting and the stress of travel and so on. So we've looked at Cambridge well-being, and we've got reports out on the website looking at that in particular. And so we are asked, and I do, and so do my colleagues, but I sit on different, I sit on different groups across the east of England, Public Health England, and also other population health groups that look at well-being in general, as well as sleep. And if we're looking at total place, and we're looking at different aspects of councils, then our research is certainly used and impacted, and we are very open to being approached to look at that more. And I've also was an advisor for the Wellbeing Standard, looking at their community health and mind aspects for a couple of years as well. So we do get involved with that at different levels in different places. Probably not so much specifically about sleep, but about well-being in general.
So there's an interesting question from Avril Stannard. So to paraphrase someone, a lot of people respond to struggling sleep by taking sleeping pills or use sort of various other medical inducements to sleep. Is that as good as normal sleep?
So yes, so thanks for bringing that up. Using sleeping pills or even herbal and natural remedies is one of the treatments for lack of sleep, and so going to your GP and talking about a persistent lack of sleep is very important, and I would never rule that out. Now, I'm not a medical clinician on that basis, so I can't comment specifically on whether the quality of sleep is the same. Anecdotally, I hear that that sometimes you don't get as much REM sleep. I haven't gone into the sort of details of the different types of sleeps, and so you're not necessarily getting the same type of quality of sleep. But one of the things that it actually really does is it helps to break that cycle once you of not getting sleep. And so that can be a very important route for many people. And so never rule out the use of over-the-counter or prescribed sleeping pills, but also do seek medical advice for that.
That's quite interesting. So people who have chronic insomnia, for example, once they can break the habit of not sleeping, you think that they're able to often sleep better after that?
Yeah, very much so. And if I put my CBT, my counselling hat back on, then basically often people will be referred by GPs that will have been prescribed sleeping pills as well as talking therapies, because some of what I mentioned about changing a relationship to sleep and changing your relationship to those noises around you, or those things that are affecting your sleep, or those stresses that you can't necessarily reduce, can have quite a profound impact. So the two things together can really work well.
We've got about just under 10 minutes left, and I'd quite like to ask some of the big sort of public policy questions. You know, we see lots of discussion of various aspects of public policy, but it's quite rare. I'm trying to think of the last time a major politician or world leader talked about sleep, you know, as a major public health thing. And maybe I've just missed those talks. Why do you think it's not treated with the seriousness that it deserves? I mean, you said it was, I think, £40 billion that it affects the UK economy, and that's even enough to pay for a test and trace programme. Or, you know, it's what, a third of the NHS's entire budget. Why isn't it taken at a level that gets the focus that it needs?
I think from a social media point of view and from a trending point of view, sleep's really taken off. You know, so I didn't include other slides there around Ariana Huffington and different celebrities and different academics that have really pushed this. I think the issue with sleep, and you know, with nutrition and exercise, sleep can be seen as being the third pillar of health. It's not often talked about by leaders, and I think that's probably because they don't know how to manage the relationship, and perhaps this is just personal conjecture, but perhaps they're having a difficult relationship with sleep themselves from time to time, and so find it very hard. I think there is that social aspect where bravado, where people feel like they should not be talking about if they can't sleep, and also as we talked about the Margaret Thatcher effect, you know, sleep is for wimps. And so Donald Trump has also probably been bringing up that he doesn't like to sleep very much. And so basically they're more inclined to use it as a weapon rather than something that will actually be a force of good across populations. So I think the sleep will be getting more and more exposure as ourselves and others are now able to show the economic impact that it has, because people can't get away from the fact that sleep is an important issue.
So interesting. I mean, I remember it's not that long ago that the first members of Parliament admitted openly to having had mental health problems, that they felt able to speak about that. So maybe we will get, you know, a breakthrough moment where people start talking about sleep problems and being honest about it.
I think so, because if you think about what I said near the start, the sleep is associated and a symptom with nearly all mental ill health conditions, and at the same time, it can also drive. Lack of sleep can be a precursor to mental ill health. So if somebody is struggling with sleep, they're probably likely to be concerned about what that message is. So the more as a society we're able to discuss, you know, health and mental health as well as physical health, and that is shifting the dial. We can all see that, but more authentically be able to talk about that and support each other, then the more sleep will follow through.
I think one of the most striking results which you mentioned was about school. You know, I think you said that children who go to school early in the day, it affects their qualifications, which affects the jobs they get, and that some places had changed their policies in response to that evidence. Is that a sort of key breakthrough moment? Do you think that might happen in the UK? Are there conversations about starting school, particularly secondary school, later?
I haven't heard there's any conversations in the UK. But as I mentioned, I know that some of the states in the US have taken the approach to shifting their times. But societal, so as society looks, if you think about the lockdown and so on, you know, shifting the school start time has a massive impact on the rest of society organising themselves to accommodate that shift. And so that also has a great an issue. And also our school start times are not quite as early as 7:30 in many cases. And so I don't think the impetus for that has followed through yet. But let's hope it is looked at. I mean, like I say, you know, there's definite economic and biological reasons why starting school a bit later provides better attainment grades.
I mean, you know, it's obviously a bit more complex than this, but I know a lot of teachers complain about having to work late after school has finished. Yeah. You know, if school started later, they could even, you know, use some of the time beforehand to prepare rather than having to get up so early themselves, which may appeal.
Well, yes, absolutely. So I think having an open debate about that would be great.
So, and then the other question, we've had a couple of things come up, again, going back to workplaces. So you've provided really clear data on a national scale. You know, Britain loses a huge amount of money, the US, Japan, because of sleep. And we've talked about some of the benefits in small groups, how many should be there. Is there a clear, compelling calculation that businesses should be able to do? You know, could you go to an Amazon, a law firm, you know, whoever it might be, and say, and do a calculation, say, you are costing yourselves money in a way that we can demonstrate because you're not doing various things? Can we do it by businesses?
Absolutely, and we do. You know, we share those results, not obviously commercial in confidence issues, organization by organization, that's up to them how they share it. But we share headlines, and you'll find that on our website. So we give a monetary cost in our reports to organizations as to how much their lower productivity is costing them. And then we give them drill down reports so that they can understand how much sleep, for instance, is an issue, how much financial well-being is an issue. And obviously certain things go hand in hand, mental health and so on. So absolutely. The productivity in presenteeism that I mentioned is from a publicly available scale, which is a work productivity and activity and impairment scale. And so if you Google that, it just slips off the tongue. But the WPAI, if you Google that, then you can see how we look for that with organizations, and then we associate these different behaviors with it. So absolutely, we can do it from a quantifiable basis. You can also do it from a qualitative basis, obviously with focus groups and so on. And we do that as well. And we partner with the University of East Anglia at the moment in research looking at that.
So if anybody listening would like to change their workplace, they can either look for some free information, or presumably for money, you can have a look at their company and, you know, make some more detailed recommendations.
Yes, absolutely. And if they took part in Britain's Healthiest Workplace, they'd be getting all that for free. But also, you know, come and chat to me. I'm more than happy to have further conversations and supporting that. Maybe come and talk to your organisations. But also, yeah, look at the research and take it from that as well. So yeah, very, very happy to have more conversations and to partner with different organisations.
I mean, I think that's possibly a wonderful place to stop. I mean, you've talked about the huge effects that lack of sleep has on individuals, but also that societal community piece. Actually, I think the economics element is quite a powerful component of it, because actually, if we can persuade businesses that they ought to be acting in their own self-interest, they're more likely to do it than just because they're nice employers, though we'd love them all to do that. If governments realise this was something they should do about, might get them extra tax revenue as well as having a happier, healthier population, they might take more action. And let's hope that is something which can come out of your work and others.
Yeah, absolutely. And to end on that point, you know, what gets measured usually gets done. And so being able to measure the impact of sleep from an economic standpoint means we can measure that across organizations and across the wider communities and economies. And we can decide whether, as a society, we're going to accept this deficit of sleep.
So, Michael, thank you very, very much for joining us. you know, you'll have to, I'm afraid, imagine the round of applause as we finish. It's slightly harder to replicate. And I won't just do it myself. But thank you so much for bringing our sleep week to a wonderful end. We've covered so much over that week, from the economics and everything that you've talked about, to some of the apps that people have used before, to baby and infant sleep, which we didn't really talk about today. And all of that is available on our website. I mean, today's isn't yet, it will be very shortly. So I hope people have a chance to look at that. Also, for those of you who haven't come to Intellectual Forum events before, we have a lot of things still coming up. So on Monday, we're hearing from the founder of Masterclass. You may have come across Masterclass, this amazing institution that gives you the chance to learn along with some of the greats on any issue. And we then have a program looking at social media, how to fix the financial system, all about atoms, all about ripples, how you can play with them. We hope to see you at some of our future events. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Again, Michael, thank you so much for everything and for being such a wonderful part of Sleep Week.
Thank you very much, Julian. Have a very good sleep tonight.